Hello, Chris. Here we are again.
Paul. How you doing?
All right, mate. Yeah, Tuesday's soon come round, hasn't it? And hello, everybody in chat. Let's make this a good one. I'm sure it's going to be. And looking forward to this guest tonight. I don't know about you, Chris.
Yes. Well, both you and I both know Mark, and a lot of people in the chat will know Mark. But I mean, the great thing about Mark is, one, he's been around a long time. Two, you can take him down any weird road you want to go down, and Mark's always got something to add to the mix. So
he has, and a lot of time it's not just, we know at UFO it's all speculative, but Mark's got a lot of what you'd call expert knowledge as well. He'll be sat there thinking, "Oh, shut up," like, because he's pretty modest, but he's good at what he does.
Yes, it's a bit different than me waffling on and just trying to pull random things. Mark can actually do it properly. So yeah, so that'll be good.
So yeah, and hope you're going to enjoy it, people. You'd asked for crop circles, so if you've got any questions, Lorraine will put them up. But if you can, please highlight them, put them in capital letters for us, and Lorraine will get through what she can, because she's going to do moderating for us as always tonight. Shall we just have a look who's in chat, Chris? I see a few names here. We've got Mike, Disabled Welshman, Sober Carper, Paranormal Visitors, Stargazer, Liam. Saw Linny earlier, so good to see you. Pete will be in. Dragonborn, Zero Dawn. Let's have a look. Tino, Dazza G, and there's loads more, but I've only got a limited. Jojo's there. Simon Riley. I've only got a limited number of faces I can see there, or names that I can see. So we might have a shout out in a bit. So over to you, Chris.
Yeah, so questions in caps, as Paul said earlier, and we'll do our best. I know last week, guys, we couldn't get them all in, but we will do our best to get them in. If you get them in earlier, the earlier you get them in, the earlier we can get through them. And instead of waiting, we'll sort of put them up when relevant. Lorraine will sort that out. So shall we bring Mark on?
Absolutely, yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Hello, Mark.
Hello. Slightly more blushing now after you build up at the beginning.
Well, no more than you deserve, mate. And yes. I would think, like Chris said, a lot of people will be familiar with you and your work and the archaeology. I mean, I was thrilled when I was looking into Flixton to find that you'd worked at Starcar, and absolutely incredible. But for what a lot of people won't know is that not only are you a researcher, author, musician, historian, archaeologist, lecturer, and a list will go on, but we'll stop at that. So I'll hand it to Chris. Where do you want to go with this, Chris?
Well, I wanted to start just to talk about Lost Treasures a little bit, because I did like it, and some of the people in here will know about that. But could you talk us through that a little bit?
Yeah,
tell people all about it.
Yeah, I mean, the origins of it all. I mean, I'm going to get a bit of a plug in here because they're still available on Amazon. There's a 3-book series called Celtic Warrington and Other Mysteries. And everything that you find in Lost Treasures, you find in those 3 books, because, of course, the books came first. And it's regional history, so it's the northern region. So a friend of mine who was a producer lecturer at Chester got hold of the books, showed them to ITV1 Granada, of course, which back then was up here. We had the northern branch of that in Manchester. And they went, yeah, we can make a series out of this. So we went down there to sell the series to them. And this, producer guy sat behind the big desk, like, the Granada top bloke. We sold the series to this guy, basically. And he said, well, we'll take it on one condition. And my producer guy said, what's that? He said, he promotes it. He produces it, he writes it, and he presents it, and that was me. I'm like, okay, no pressure at all. This is 2004. So in 2005, we got stuck in and we cracked on. Now, the guy I was working with from Chester, Phil Hurst, he was an amazing bloke, absolutely amazing bloke. So all the technology, the technical side of that, that's him. The rest of the team, obviously, we had cameramen, we had, continuity people, we had everything. It was a proper production. But I was saying earlier on, the idea was to try to make archaeology what it is in the movies. Some huge movie franchises out there, people like, Raiders of the Lost Ark, Tomb Raider, all this kind of thing, tons of it, National Treasure. It's all based on on archaeology. And my argument was, well, there's a certain other archaeology team that's been going a long time, and the geophys fails, and it's a series of small walls and a bucket full of pottery. And, in one case, he didn't find anything at all. But, shout out to the guy I know who came up with that one, because he was a local, lives around here. The idea was to try to bring in the movie values, and do it on a slightly bigger scale. But at the same time, we also went sideways because I don't know if you know Pegg and Frost, Simon Pegg. They use a board where they write all the ideas on for every movie, and it's done that way. It's done almost like a flow chart. And I took that idea on board. So every episode had its own flow chart. So, of course, that means everybody, the cameraman, the editor, me, everybody, we know where we're going. But the vast majority of it is not scripted. So we know what the subject is, and we know what the location is, and we know where we're going. But what you see on camera is real. If I pick a piece of flint up, or some woman marches out with a bucket full of pottery or whatever, none of that's rehearsed. We're actually finding stuff. And I'm just going to surprise you now, because the reason for that is that ITV does not do archaeology and history. They're not allowed to, because the BBC do that. What they do is news and current affairs. And that's what we were. We were a news and current affairs program reporting on stuff that was actually happening. So a lot of what you see are brand new discoveries. It's things that nobody's ever seen before. So the whole thing has this marvelous, legendary flavor. And the reason we're talking about it now is that I finally, after 18 years, last year, finally managed to get all the episodes up on YouTube. So all 22 episodes are up there. We did 3 specials for Sky. They're all up there. And each series of the 3 series has extras. There's a couple of extras. There's outtakes and things that have not appeared up there. So the whole shooting match is out there now. If you want to binge watch 10.5 hours of it, you're quite welcome to go and do so. And it ran from 2005, the last time it appeared on Sky. I think the last episode went out in 2010 or 2011. And that was it. We only did the 3. Fabulous. I mean, I could talk all night just on Lost Treasure. I could do a whole program on that. Obviously, the story behind it, what have you. Hey, a question's popped up.
Has Mark ever found anything underground that is speculated to be connected to crop circles?
Okay, that's a nice starting question. That does actually bring us back on track quite well, because obviously archaeologists are associated with digging. That's the main thing that we do. We archaeologically excavate. But it's interesting. Obviously, the crop circle is imposed on top of whatever's already there. So if archaeology runs through a field, or, whatever, field drains, electric cables, whatever you've got that's below ground, the crop circle just comes in on top of that as another layer. I was going to say then as a surface feature, but they're not. They're not just surface features. There is stuff going on below ground, and it's usually to do with the water table and the magnetic field. So, ley lines, dowsing, whatever you want to refer to it as, electromagnetism, it interrupts what's going on in terms of the electrical field. So that there is stuff going on below ground. There's plenty happening, but not something I could find with a trowel and a bucket and a sieve. It's not something that's going to turn up in that sense. Most of the physical evidence is sat above the surface, of course, which is the circle itself.
So when did you? Where did from Lost Treasures? Where did crop circles come into this? How did you even get into crop circles?
A long time before I got into TV. You've sort of got a beginning and an end, and we jumped in at the end, because the last thing I did was I did Ancient Aliens. I think it was they filmed in 2022 and it was broadcast in 2023. I think it's season 19, episode 2. There you go. I think that's where I am. Anyway, it's the one on crop circles. They used me on the trailer, so it'd be easy enough to find out, which one I'm in. That was the last thing I did on crop circles. Although I can announce that a new crop circle popped up. I think it was either in Germany or the Netherlands 2 days ago. It's a big spiky ball inside a circle. It's a belter. So if you want to start Googling that, go and find it. It's a stonking circle. I'm fairly 60-70% certain it was Germany, but I might be wrong. It could have been the Netherlands. It's happened so recently that, But to answer the question, going back to the beginning, I took an interest in the 1980s. when the first circles started to appear. And then I really got into it in the 1990s, because you actually had people doing proper scientific studies, mostly down south where these things turn up, Essex, Sussex, Wessex, round Stonehenge, Salisbury Plain, all that kind of area. Lots of people down there got stuck in looking at it from a scientific point of view. I met most of the people involved in that research at the time. Obviously, from an archaeological point of view, we were developing things like ground radar and, geophysics and all that sort of stuff was in development. So there was a huge crossover in technology. So really, I've been there right from the very beginning. There was a lot of stuff came out, published in 94, 95, 96. Some guys out trying to film UFOs, filmed an orb spinning around a field, and the crop drops into a circle. They filmed that. I think that was 1992. I think they caught that, which I think ended up in the show that I did for Ancient Aliens. So there was a huge amount going on then, and then it's kind of gone through a curve, like all things in this particular mysteries field. It peaks because you get the real thing, and then they try and debunk it, and people then start to try and produce fakes, and it peaks, and then it starts to drop. And I know that certainly by the end of the 1990s, beginning of the 2000s, people in certain commercial areas of the South, I'll leave it at that, were producing these things using CGI. So there are some absolute, complete, never existed in a billion years, that have been doctored in paint shop and things. There are those out there. But maybe we can get into what the real circles are, as we plow into the program.
Go on, Chris. Sorry.
Yeah, Dazzler G is saying, is it true that this year there has not been as many? Is that right?
I'm aware of the fact that there's not been as many in the UK. I think we might actually, for decent ones, I think we're in single figures, but there has still been a splattering of them worldwide. This latest one in Germany, whatever, being the latest one. There are noticeably fewer of them. Why? I don't know. In terms of the content of the circle, I think in the 21st century, the content has peaked, because obviously we've had the huge circle with the binary message in it that had the alien face next to it. If that's thrown into negative, if you negativize the photo of the field, there's stars in the background and everything. It's like it's halftone. It's like a photograph in wheat. Two guys on a board and a rope have definitely not done that one. It's beyond that. And there's quite a few others like that. We've had some absolute sort of humdingers in the 21st century. Maybe they've given us the message, and now it's up to us to, accept that, and go with it. So they are just getting fewer. I think that's possibly what's happened.
Well, this is interesting, because Darren Lewis is saying, have we had patterns in other things other than crops, like snow, for example, or sand?
Yeah. Well, the short answer is yes. I've seen it in wheat, barley, straw and hay. I've seen it in those yellow flowers, rapeseed. I've seen rapeseed circles. They get a lot of those in China, actually. Circles and images made in rapeseed. Snow, you get ice rings. I personally have photographed about 35, 36 ice rings on a sealed lake. By sealed, I mean there's no flowing water going in or out of it, just a big sheet of ice. And there was about 36 of these ice rings on that. You get ice rings all over the world, and they're not entirely sure what's going on. In some cases, where there are currents, there's a perfect circle cut out in the ice, and those circles can sometimes rotate. So they do appear. The funniest one of the lot, I mean, I'm just going to throw that as an by the way, some guy was up in somewhere like Yorkshire, North Yorkshire, and photographed a sheep circle. And it appeared in the press. And then the following week, the farmer said, well, that's because I go around in a tractor with my tractor in a circle, putting out the sheep food, so they all congregate in a big circle. So that kind of fooled everybody. It was like, oh, you can make circles out of sheep now, can you? So, yeah, they do appear. They do appear in other places, and not necessarily as detailed patterns, but yes, they do.
So Lee says, evening, Mark. Could you please tell us, in our own mind, what do you think a crop circle is and its purpose?
Okay, I'll clarify. You've got two categories. You've got man-made, and obviously the purpose of that is a hoax, and some of them are very, very good. They're very, very good. And some of them make a lot of money for the people that do them. And then you've got the real thing. And the real thing usually has an element of message about it. If we really get stuck in and really start to look at the fine detail, you begin to pick it apart. You start to realize that, it could be binary, or it could be a star map. Like the one with the alien face is quite exceptional, because some of the stars are in the right place in the background of that one. So, that's proper. There's no messing about with that one. There was a sequence of crop letters that were put out, I think, in the United States. They did it in a crop there, and they put out this thing as a message, and it was in, I'm trying to remember what font it was in. They used some mystical font thing, square lettering, to do it. And lo and behold, they got a response the following night that came back, and it came back in the same letter type. So, it's messages. I think there's messages going on there. I think first it was just hello. There's just a circle. Hello, here we're here. Then it started getting a bit more, hello, we're intelligent. We know what we're doing. There's patterns and details and things coming in here. And then it got really serious, and it was like, okay, now we're going to talk. Certainly in the 21st century, there's been a lot of actual translatable material that's gone in. And some of them are sort of a bit confusing, because they're kind of in the middle. When you actually start to break them down, when you start to look at the crop circles, sometimes the obvious is not as obvious as you think, because the mathematics involved, the what's behind them, because obviously mathematics is the language of the universe. What's going on in the background sometimes is more important than what's immediately obvious. One of the best examples of that happened at Stonehenge. They were a party of tourists came onto Stonehenge, and then they went off. And then there was a 20-minute gap before the next party came on. And in that 20-minute gap, 90, I think it was 96 or 97 crop circles appeared in the field next door to Stonehenge. Now, not only is that physically impossible, not only is the timing in broad daylight absolutely ridiculous, not only were they all perfect crop circles, but the thing actually came out and formed a Mandelbrot, which is one of the fractal designs. And it's very famous. And there were so many witnesses to this, because there was a group of people who were like, yeah, there was nothing there. And then there's another huge group of people who were absolutely amazed by what had turned up. So like I say, sometimes it's not the fact that it's a crop circle, it's what's going on behind it. It's the extra detail, the extra information that's in it.
If they can communicate, well, they obviously can communicate using words and pictures and placing them into nature, even if it's man-made, man-created nature. Why can't they just communicate? Do you think the crop circle is more impacting? It's reaching a wider audience?
Yes, it gives us something physical to work with. But then that's the eternal question, which is, why don't these things just turn up? I mean, they're going nuts in America over disclosure at the moment. Why don't they just be honest and just go, here's an alien? There is this argument that either we're not ready for it or they're not ready for it, depending on your view of, what the two different existing races are. Maybe they don't want to come because we're too barbaric and we're likely to wage war on them, etc., etc. And maybe we're not sure we want them to come because we like our nice little cozy universe the way it is. It's a massive question.
Edward Upton, is it true that the more intricate the crop circle is, the more likely it is to be fake?
No, that is definitely not true. Some of the really intricate ones are clearly not physically possible. There's a line beyond which we can't do it. It's not possible. And the more you start to dig into the science, and what I would encourage people to do is go back to the 1990s, have a look at the books that were written initially in the 1990s, because they are relatively free from fakery, trickery, nonsense, all the rest of it, because they were dealing with a blank slate. They were genuinely, you know, there was an institute for crop circles that were genuinely studying these things. If you go back to their work, the way the circles are formed is not the way we would do it. Very early on, they realized if you have a rope and you have a piece of wood and you walk round and you flatten all of the crop down, the forensic evidence of scratches, snap stalks, footprints, you know, drag marks, holes, you name it. There's so much going on there that you could say, right, somebody's done this, you know. But then the proper circles, the real ones, all of the corn or whatever it's, made of, has actually just done that. It's just laid down, and it's buckled at the joints. So the joints, the stalks of grass, have been superheated at the joint, and it's done that. Right. And they've all done it at once, and they've all done it to a pattern, almost like something, well, hovered over the top of it and flashed a blueprint, flashed an image onto the stems, causing the stems to respond very much as we would do with, say, pixels in a photo, pixels in an image. You know, the whole field is each stalk, each stem is a pixel. And as it drops and it forms that image, it becomes an overall picture, you know. So, there's a lot going on. There's more going on there than meets the eye.
So Lenny asks, what's the earliest crop circle recorded, Mark?
Okay, it's fairly easy to Google this. I'm pretty sure it was in the first half of the 17th century. So in the 1600s, sticking in my mind is something like 1610, 1611. There's an engraving of a thing called the mowing devil. So if you just put into Google, just put in mowing devil, you'll get this image of a circle with a devil with a scythe going round mowing it. That, as far as I'm aware, that is the earliest actual recorded with an image version of what we would know as a crop circle. It's a very simple, you know, arrangement. I mean, you could speculate. You can go back further and say, well, you know, fairy circles in Ireland, and, you know, flat areas in woods, and circles in, you know, that are given as fairy or elf or leprechaun ritual sites or whatever. That's it. That's the famous mowing devil. That's really where it all begins. But there could have been more. There could have been earlier ones which have crept into folklore. But we just don't have an image for it. And in most cases, we don't have a starting point or a location. But that one we do. That one's quite well known.
Yeah, I've seen that and never really. Yeah, I've never really. I don't know I know I've seen it, but I don't know in what context I've seen it.
I'm glad Mark's put it in context, because I'd have thought there were little flames at the top of each one of those. But obviously not.
Well, it might be the devil with fire, but you can see what he's doing to the crop. He's actually going along and laying it down. Yeah, you know, in front of his scythe. So presumably, some poor farmer got up one day and found that and decided it was the work of Satan.
Get off of my land.
That's it.
Right, go on. 1 second.
Dragonborn, what does Mark make of the recent crop circle featuring the pentagram and moon phases?
Yeah, I knew that was going to pop up. The three phases of the moon, and bearing in mind I know a huge amount about witchcraft as well, 3 phases of the moon are a relatively recent graphic device. Representation. By that I mean within the last 100 years, because obviously as an archaeologist I'm talking about thousands of years. Yes, We've got the crown of Diana and we've got all, you know, moon phases. That's the one. That actual symbol of you know, it's made Mother Crone. It's the 3 phases of moon. That's quite recent. That's relatively recent, as indeed is the inclusion of the pentagram. Now I'm not saying the pentagram's recent, because the pentagram isn't. I don't know anyone that's done any serious research on that. I think people assumed it was, you know, a couple of guys with a rope. You know, the 2 out circles, for example, you can almost imagine if you put a central punch in the middle of the out circles, you could then work towards the pentagram fairly quickly to level the crop and produce that. And you've not got an enormous amount of shaded area. So I'm inclined to think that one's probably us. I have to say that, disappointingly so. A nice image, an extremely brave attempt, very creative, very artistic, but not a patch. I mean, if you can Google the latest one that came up in Germany or Netherlands, whatever, you can find an image of that one, because that only came up today. It was only found 2 days ago. You've only got to take one look at that to realise it's in a different league.
So, question, Mark, can you tell us more about the cover-up on the Grasdorf plate? It was a crop circle found in Germany, July 20th, 1991. Scientists found abnormal readings and mag radiation, marginal radiation.
Yeah, the simple answer to that is yes. I mean, that's where I was going earlier on when I was talking about changes above ground. Okay, as well as all the peculiarities within the crop itself. They've had all kinds of detection instruments in there, and it went on right through the 1990s. So that's one of many sites that they tested. They took in Geiger counters, they took in magnetic devices, magnetometry, all sorts of different things they used to find out what was going on, and very realistically got results. So looking at those two images, obviously the one on the left is I'm assuming a collection of crop circles. The one on the right, the problem you've got with this one is that if the one on the right is as old as it appears to be, because I can see there are symbols in that could be genuine ancient Germanic symbols. And do you remember what I said earlier on as well about crop circles don't affect what's buried? So if that's buried somewhere, that will already be there. And it's almost as if somebody's got hold of that and then tried to reproduce that in a field. But the one in the field, I'm not seeing any, it might just be the image, but the detail, again, you've got a similar kind of situation that you had then with the witchcraft symbols. There's nothing there that we couldn't do, that isn't, that's exceptional.
Looking at the shadow, it almost looks like it stood up, that those
Yeah,
it's a terrible reproduction.
Yeah, it looks. It's not fake, I apologize, but it looks fake.
Yeah, the lines are not going through it either. The crop track lines, and they should go all the way through. So I just think it's a bad photo.
Yeah.
That's
it's interesting that but a lot of the ancient symbols do actually turn up as parts of crop circles. But again, that's another thing. When crop circles first began, and they started to expand from being circles, the vast majority of them didn't resemble anything that we already had. And what's happening now is it's almost like the guys that are producing the fakes have run out of ideas. So you get scarabs, you know what I mean? You get sweet corn, you name it, you get all sorts of rubbish that turn up as circles just because they want to show they can do it, but they're not different. They don't contain any information that's any different to what we already have.
Yeah, I'm just going to find that one you were talking about, Mark. This the one in Germany.
Yeah. Well, it's so recent.
While you're looking for that, we'll just.
If it's not Germany, try Netherlands, because you might. It might be
the one, Mark.
No, that's not. That's
not it, is it not?
It's a belter, but it's not the one I'm thinking of.
So Andrew Ross says the mowing devil story was a farmer fell out with the mower and wouldn't agree to the price the mower was charging.
Could be.
Andrew, you'll have met Andrew at conferences.
Yeah.
He's.
If you're still searching for that circle, it only appeared on the 20th of this month, so that might help you to locate it. It was the 20th of the 7th, so it's only just happened. My favourite crop circle. Whoa, there's so many of them. Gosh, my head's just gone. I've got thousands of images of them. That is such a hard question. I'm not dodging the question because, to be honest with you, there's so many of them that I really like. I can't single one particular one out. But what I can say is that, like that one, for example, the more complex and the more it achieves mathematically, because obviously that's got that 3D ball thing going on around the outside, I tend to appreciate those more.
Right.
You know, because if it's aliens, they're doing a brilliant job, and if it's us, we're doing a brilliant job. You know, it's not easy to do that in a crop. That came out very early on. It's a difficult thing to do.
Can you remember, Mark? I'm not sure. You'll probably remember exact year. It's 63 or 67 when the craters appeared all over the UK, Wiltshire and Dufton Fell and Lanarkshire. If you don't remember, I'm sorry for throwing that one at you, but Patrick Moore was involved to dispel the myth of little green men. But whilst he was looking at the craters, he observed patterns and depressions in the crop, in the barley crop, and did a fantastic job, puzzled by the twisting of the crop and how it had turned and dropped over. I didn't know whether you were familiar with it.
Well, do you know what's really weird? That's kind of poking me memory a bit, because I'm pretty sure it was 67.
Yeah, 67.
The reason it's poking me mind is I was only 5 years old at that time, but it appeared on something silly like John Craven's Newsround. You know, the programs they do for school kids. Because I remember him standing in the field, you know, looking at those depressions and poking at the damage to the crop. I can sort of vaguely remember that.
Yeah.
So I don't think I'd remember that if it was 63, because I'd only be one.
He did a brilliant write-up on the crop circles with that, unknowingly, because he'd been pulled in to dispel the myth of little green men.
Yeah.
What's this? What we're looking at here, Chris?
Yeah, well, this is something recent. This is the 10th of July, but I'm just reading an article here, and it's saying police appeal for criminal damage. So I'm assuming that they're alluding that this is man-made.
Well, I would say it probably was. That's got all the hallmarks of a man-made one, because it's, you know, it's physically possible to do that just with a rope and a peg and a, you know. Oh, here we go. Do I think crop circles are related to the Fae, to fairies at all?
Maybe fairy rings is alluding to, maybe, you know, I don't know.
Well, you're going down back to the ley line avenues as well, and sacred sites that have presence and magnetism, and, you know, they affect you spiritually as well as physically, which, of course, proper crop circles do. And crop circles have been observed to pop up on ley lines and hot spots. Therefore, and let's get 21st century about this, if there's an element of portal about it, if things can come and go, you know, if it's messing with the fabric of reality and it's there in different frequencies, then there's absolutely no reason why you wouldn't get, quote, fairy folk, not a very good label, but, you know, turning up. Because when you say fairy folk, you know, every single society on planet Earth has got a different opinion of what these little people are, where they come from and what they look like. So any number of things, you know, could come through, you know, anything from Bigfoot right through to little green men. You know, it doesn't necessarily limit itself just to fairies. So I suppose the answer is yes. Yeah, there's going to be a connection somewhere. Oh.
Lease, carrying on in part two of that question, in the centre they unearthed 3 plates, 1 gold, 1 silver, 1 bronze, 99% pure, with lost Celtic writing on the same as the circle.
Lost Celtic writing.
Lost
on the same as the crop circle. Okay, there's a number of issues with that. The implication is lost Celtic language, but I didn't see that in those photographs. What you were looking at was, well, sort of Bronze Age or Iron Age. It's about 1500 BC kind of period, Germanic symbolism. So that it's not Celtic, so that doesn't sit right. And purity of metals in the past was impossible. So the implication there is that they must be recent. That must be a modern creation of some kind. What they've done is they must have used the Germanic symbolism to do that. Norway, Sweden, Scandinavia, Denmark, there's lots of that imagery around. Created a mold and just plopped that in. So again, the photograph is deceiving because it doesn't necessarily have to be as old as it looks. Yeah. I mean, breaking the evidence down, looking at it from a a fairly knowledgeable point of view, it's starting to lean towards it being a fake, which I would have deduced. I mean, take away the golden plates and the silver plates and whatever, just looking at that crop circle pattern, that's something we can do. It's not complex enough.
When you said earlier, sorry, we'll go through this. Jack, 1948 UK. A few years ago, I saw a photograph of a crop circle, and only the top 6 inches of the crop were bent over. I have no other detail.
I wouldn't have a problem with that at all. That's going back to the 1990s, to the real crop circles, where they seem to be able to select exactly how they destroy the crop and the way they do it, which bit bends and how. That's precisely the kind of evidence they were looking at to decide which circles are real and which ones are fake. So that would be a good indication of a real circle. I'm fairly certain of that.
Is there any evidence that the nutritional value of the corn or the barley has changed? Has that been tested or analysed after?
Yeah, but not quite in that way. Back in, I think it was 1994, 5 and 6, they collected seeds, the actual kernels from the top of the stalks. And what they then did was they replanted them to see what would happen. And the fertility level of them had gone up and the strength of the crop had increased, and it yielded a better crop.
Right.
So the answer, I suppose, is yes, but not directly. Nobody actually made bread out of, the crop that had gone flat, but they then proceeded to examine what was happening biologically. And certainly the ability of that area to reproduce was significantly improved. So something definitely had happened. These are all the science bits, the scientific things that people forget exist in real circles, real crop circles. The science has a lot to say about this. So if in later times, if now in the 21st century, if they're trying to cover it up or muddy the water, or, there's loads of fakes out there or whatever's going on, it's because early on there was a lot of real stuff going on.
Is there a general opinion then from men of science that some of these are real, genuine unknowns?
Yes, yeah, I would say so. I like the one with the alien face and the binary, and there's a couple of others like that. There's others with text in. I'm trying to remember. There was another one with a picture actually encoded in it. That has been exposed to a lot of scientific scrutiny. I mean, the one that appeared in the field with the binary and with the face was directly adjacent to a military listening station, radar listening station. That you can see it on the photos. It's just on the side of the field, and that's manned, permanently. So this thing just appeared out of nowhere. So immediately that got what I would call official attention. That became something that a lot of experts over a long period of time have looked at. So yes, I think sensible people, sensible science folks will say that either the jury's out or the real circles are real.
Right.
They will say that. That's the one with the alien face. There we go. That's the one on the right hand side's interesting because it's like a parody of the panel that we stuck on Voyager. The thing we sent out to space has got that describing human beings and what have you. It's DNA, it's figures, it gives the coordinates of where we are, etc., in the galaxy and whatnot. So it's on a panel. It's on a panel on a satellite flying through space. Next minute, that's what we get back. But the problem with that is there are photographs of the panel in existence. You can Google that equivalent panel on the satellite, which then makes you wonder if it was somebody else. But the bit that you can't do, that you can't really query in the same field, is the face on the left, because that is a photograph. That's essentially what that is.
Yeah.
We don't have the means to do that. There's no way that was done using a piece of rope and a flat board. So that kind of one thing supports the other. In isolation, the one on the right could be said to be a fake or a copy. The one on the left, clearly the one on the left isn't. You can't fake that. That's not something that you can do. Which then, if the one on the right is correct, it could be giving us information about aliens.
Yeah, go on. Sorry, Paul. Go on.
No, I'm just going off topic a bit. So this panel has got the DNA code and and aspects of what we're about as a species. Yeah.
Well, that's the same information that we sent out about us. That's information coming back that has been adjusted presumably about them.
Well, you know, I want to stay on crop circles because I think I'm interested in this. It's great having somebody who's got a lot of knowledge of it. But I just want to throw this one at you. Do you think it's a good idea sending a message out describing what we're about? I mean, they're telling the universe probably something that might consider us as food. Here's where we are. This is the makeup of the human.
The funny thing is, I think it was Carl Sagan that said exactly the same thing when he got wind of the fact that they were going to put this information onto a satellite and fire it into space. I think he said pretty much word for word what you just said.
Yeah, he was involved with it. He did it, I think.
Yeah, I think he was involved, but he was acting under instruction. So maybe he later decided it was somebody like him, or possibly him himself. Maybe he decided it wasn't such a good idea. But you've got to remember when the satellites were being thrown out into space in the 1960s and 1970s, this had already been going on for many years. You know, we'd been visited from elsewhere for centuries. You know, that's it. Yeah, that's it. Somebody has broken it down. Basically,
yeah, that's ours, and that's the response there. Because I was saying a couple of weeks ago, this is meant to be that's meant to represent their antenna, isn't it? Allegedly,
I have not got into great detail with that. I must admit, I made note of it, and I was more interested. I have focused more on the face, the photograph in the corner.
Because as you say, Mark, that's incredible, really. Isn't it? That's like that would take.
It's very tough act to follow. That
you're not going to do that overnight, are you? Two guys with a board. It's just not going to happen.
No. And that came up, I think, certainly within a year or so of the one that has the binary on it, that photograph one as well. So we got this sort of whoosh, if you like, of a couple of seasons where you had these immensely complicated ones, and then it went off the boil. Maybe we haven't got the message. You know, maybe that's why nothing more's happening.
I think we've definitely not got the message.
So Ian asks, "Hi Mark, any thoughts on Matt Williams' work with crop circles?"
Okay, I'm going to show me ignorance now. I'm probably aware of the work he's done, but not aware of him as an individual. So I'd need a bit more detail to answer that.
Sorry about that, Ian.
No worries. No worries.
Yeah, Matt. Well, what we haven't touched on yet, and we've all used the word "there." So who's doing this, Mark? There. What? I mean, look, there's no one answer. Obviously, I know that. But what, in your opinion? I think. Are you kind of alluded there that there's an ET factor, perhaps?
Well, that's a complicated question now. If you'd have asked me that question in, let's say, 1970, I'd have given you the stock sort of, you know, Arthur C. Clarke, George Adamski, you know, I'd have given you, they're, you know, flying saucers, tin things that whiz around in the sky with little blokes in of different kinds. And that was that. Maybe there is, maybe there isn't, you know?
Yeah.
Good old Eric von Daniken was still working away then. He was still putting stuff out. So, you know, the jury was most definitely out in the 70s. But then 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2010s, 2020s, we're a long way further down the line now. And you've got people like the guys on Skinwalker Ranch who are throwing everything we've got at it, you know. And clearly, very, very clearly, Steve Meara would support me on this as well. He's the expert on interdimensions and frequencies. He's even better at it than I am, miles better. Now I think we're looking at real science that makes it a genuine probability. It's gone beyond possibility now into probability.
Yeah.
That there are definitely things out there that we just either can't see or can't hear or haven't communicated with, or we're just not going about it the right way. You know, there's more to it. You know, again, you've got the same thing going on with this as you've got with crop circles. You've got the real stuff and you've got the fakes, and it just keeps going down that same avenue. But through it all, there's a golden thread, and the golden thread has got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger as the years have gone on. Each decade brings new information. So I'm going to say, when I now refer to they or them or whatever, there's a kind of interdimensional thing going on there. I mean, the little ball that whizzed round in the 1990s and dropped the crop circle, that clearly wasn't in our space, if you understand what I mean. It kind of arrives, does what it does, which it shouldn't be able to do, and then just vanishes, gone. And that's a common factor with all UFO, UAP, whatever sightings, is that kind of behavior. So what we're now doing is we've taken our eyes off the little silver discs and the little green men, and we're starting to say, okay, what do they do? Where do they go? Why are they here? How do they do it? You know, and so on. Hence that book I did, Europe's Roswell, 40 years since impact. A lot has changed in 40 years. We've re-examined that debris, and that debris is still throwing up things that we can't explain.
What do you think, Mark, the possibility that the visitors will say, as Whitley Strieber would call them, what do you think that to the possibility that they're too advanced, too intelligent to actually know how to communicate with us on a one-to-one? I mean, we look at an ants or any kind of animal, we don't really know how to communicate with them, do we?
There's probably two sides to that. I come at it from a slightly different place. Obviously, as an archaeologist, I look at history and I look at time, and that's kind of my thing. That's just what I do. So in the past, these creatures have made it very clear, or these beings have made it very clear, they can communicate with us if they want to. There's a billion and one different ways they can do it. Telepathy, writing, talking to us, anything, whatever. There's electronic devices have come up with text on. There's all kinds of ways of communication. So I don't think it's a case of them either not being able to do that or not wanting to do that from that point of view. But I go down the avenue that given all this massive amount of time that's passed for the human race, I think these beings are actually rather scared of what we're going to do to them. I don't think. I'll give you an example. Looking at Crystal Skulls and Human Heads, which is the first book I did with Philip Mantle on Flying Disc Press. That book, at the time I wrote that, there were 9 different species of human beings. Now, I think we're up to 31. They've clearly identified 31 different species, of which the only survivor is us. Now, that tells you all you need to know. Whatever the cataclysm was that took out the old world, we fought like merry hell to survive, and we came out on top. That doesn't make us the most intelligent species. That makes us the most violent. We are warriors. That's what we are. There's no arguing with that at all. And I think that's what's stopping the aliens. I think they're basically like, no, we just don't want anything to do with this. It's nuts. But the second part to that question, which is equally as interesting, is why these people are here, why these guys are coming through, why, what are they up to? And again, in that same book, I concluded they're not from the future. They're not from another planet. They're not like, truly aliens. I think that way, way back in the past, way back before the Earth was completely obliterated a dozen times over, which we know about, there was a civilization that somehow got to grips with time and space. I think they're time travelers from the past. And the reason they're here is to find out where we've ended up. And I think that very neatly explains, all your abductions, because they don't just take people, they take cattle, they take animals, they'll take anything from a ferret to a grizzly bear. There's all kinds of stuff that's disappeared. They're taking biological samples. They're appearing in strange places where they're obviously looking for something. They're taking human beings, and experimenting on human beings. You have to excuse my little alien who's just wandering through. So they're clearly here with a purpose, and the purpose appears to be scientific, and they seem to be trying to find out where our environment is at, what's going on, where have we ended up given everything that's happened in between. It also gets rid of the paradox problem, because obviously if you're coming from the future, you could do some damage and you could actually eradicate yourself, because you've arrived before your time, so you can do lasting damage. But if you're going into the future, if you're going forward, you can't do that. You can't do it. And for them, if they crack this problem of time and space doesn't exist.
Yeah, I was going.
There is no time, there is no space. You know, so that's what I think we're seeing, and that backs up what they're getting at Skinwalker as well. That's the phenomena we're seeing. This idea of portals where there is no time, there is no space, and they're just jumping in and out. You know.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, it kind of ties in a little bit to what Keel's work as well. You know, the ultra-terrestrial sort of hypothesis that he was talking about there. That would kind of fit. And Paul talked about, you were talking about the air balloon thing, weren't you, Paul, the other week?
Bit of a crackle there, Mark.
Sorry, he'll go
on now. We're talking about what, Chris?
You know, the ancient airships.
The airships, sort of late 1800s, early 1900s. And have you got any knowledge on them, Mark? Just throw that one at you.
Yeah, I've heard about them. I was talking to somebody the other day about the one that crashed in America, and they got some bodies out of it. Because people say it hit a windmill, but it didn't. It just came down on a farm and hit a farm building, and they ended up burying these bodies in the local cemetery. And then, lo and behold, in the 1970s, somebody came along and dug them up, you know, because they were radioactive or something like that, made some excuse, and the bodies are gone, you know, which for an archaeologist, it just makes me grind my teeth and chew my knuckles, you know, because I'd have been in there with a shovel, no problem at all. So I am kind of aware of that. You know, that body of what's going on there.
What's interesting about the ones I looked into, and we're only looking at East and North Yorkshire in these archives, they were reported, and 1909 seemed a prominent year for them. But you'd think, well, it's some man-made tech that they're testing, but then the people talk about these things being silent and going from a huge searchlight that's on the ground looking at them to a dot in the distance in seconds.
Yeah,
and you know.
I think it's half and half again, because I when I was researching the metal from the Europe's Roswell crash in Wales, one of the suggestions was that it was duralumin. So I started researching what duralumin is, and that was developed for the building of airships, and it was patented, I think, in something like 1918, 1919. So they had the basics of airship technology in the Edwardian era, you know. Think steampunk, you know, it's kind of, that's not too far off the truth. People were chucking balloons up made out of weird stuff. And it was happening in America as well as over here. So I think some of them are us, and some of them are definitely not us. You know, it's that, is it or isn't it? You know.
Yeah, Andy's asking here, hi Mark, going off on a tangent, the UFO crash at Llanilar left metal debris described as having olive drab paint and serial numbers on it on the inside. Would you suggest that it is terrestrial?
Do you know, this is going to be the case that never goes away. I don't even think I'm allowed to tell you this, but I'm going to tell you this because I'm not allowed to tell you this. We did four. There were 4 official tests done. One was done back in, I think it was the 1990s, and it was sent to British Aerospace, and they were the ones that originally thought that the metal was duralumin. And that was it. That's all we had when we did the documentary in 2008, that we had this weird metal. That was that. So when the book was published by Philip, we did the second and third analysis. We sent one off to Australia and one off to America. Now, the Australian one came up with stuff that appeared to be of terrestrial origin. They came up with all this blah, 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 and this particular American glue. And then the Americans came back and went, we haven't got the foggiest idea what the hell this is. There is no American glue. We don't know what it is. It's made of lanthanum. The bit I'm not supposed to tell you is we've gone and done it again. We've sent it to a lab in Greece, okay? Now, at the moment, this is so new that this is only like weeks old, okay, and none of it's published, so I can't really tell you in great detail what the unpublished report is. But what I can tell you is they've come back saying, well, we're not really sure about the previous tests, but this isn't right, and this isn't right, and this isn't right, and we're not sure what the hell this is. So out of all of those tests, I'm inclined to think that the Australians either got it wrong or they hit upon something that was alien but is now in common use. In other words, it's back engineered.
Yeah. Right.
Because the rest of it, and I mean all of it, doesn't make any sense. You know, none of it. not even the duralumin, even that doesn't make any sense because they weren't using that. There was no stealth technology at all whatsoever with that in the 1980s, in 83. We've also done some Freedom of Information Act stuff as well. We've drawn a blank on something like 6 out of 7 applications, but the 7th one, which came from the Central Records Office in Kew, confirmed the existence of the crash and confirmed the existence of the recovery crew. So that's good enough. They can't tell us anything else, but that's good enough. So we're getting there. We're getting there. So the answer to that, would this suggest a terrestrial origin? I'm sort of 70-80% that it's extraterrestrial. I think it's come from somewhere else. I don't think it's one of ours. I think I might sort of meet you halfway and say might be some back engineering in there. There might be something going on where either, Roswell gave us the technology that resulted in that crash, or that crash has been back engineered from other information. So I might so it's kind of, back engineered going into alien, but I don't think it's one of ours. I really don't think it's one of ours. The latest tests from Greece confirmed something that we speculated back in the documentary, that the sort of rubbery honeycomb coating that's all over this material will transmit electricity. You can turn the entire ship into one giant electrical circuit, One of the other tests we did, which is in the public domain, when they fired an electron microscope at it, it bounced the frequencies back. They couldn't get a clear image. And that's the lanthanum. The lanthanum pushes back. Whatever you fire at it, it just pushes it back. Right. So this thing that crashed would have, to all intents and purposes, been invisible, completely invisible. So there are certain aspects of that they're off the Richter scale odd. I think it's going to go down in history as another Roswell. It's provable. It's science. We physically have those pieces to look at.
In essence, as well, Matt, wouldn't a crash be sort of like the ultimate disinformation campaign to crash something deliberately, leave it 20 years, and then go, all right, yeah, it was ours, and we can, and then really go to town on the detail and say, and we can show you and prove that it's ours because look at this.
Yeah, exactly. Why not do that? Yeah. I mean, they could have done that with Roswell, but they didn't. Yeah. The funny thing is, and I've said this on interviews before, I'm sure that after Roswell, there was a file on military shelves that basically said what to do in the event of a crashed UFO. Yeah, that's the playbook, because they did exactly, and I mean exactly the same thing with the one in Wales. So for me, because I deal with documents all the time, I'm usually the historical ones, but you can see where, one thing has led to another, has led to another, has led to another, and you can follow the thread. And it's quite obvious they did exactly the same thing in Wales as they did at Roswell. That's just how they deal with it, But like you say, why do that? I mean, I've said this on interviews. We've got the pieces of metal. We've got the analysis. We've got the material. Why doesn't somebody just come out and tell us what it is?
Yeah. I think that's sort of the way now. That's exactly what they don't do. It could because it keeps the water muddy, and it just makes it even more difficult to. I mean, we've said it before. They perfected that technique a long time ago, didn't they?
I mean, the easiest thing to say would have been, yes, it was a prototype American drone. Here's the plans, here's the photos. 40 years ago, we're not bothering with that anymore. We don't use them anymore. That's what it was.
Yeah,
but no.
Going back to briefly just the crop circle thing. Do you think there's also is the potential there for an element of, if we talk about, a lot of people talk about the Earth having its own sort of consciousness, and that consciousness ties in with what they call dragon lines and layers. And a friend of mine does a lot of research in that area, Alice Taylor. Do you think there's a connection, a more natural sort of organic connection there, consciously, perhaps?
I don't know. The best way to answer that, I'm going to give another book plug. Revealing the Green Man. On Amazon.
Book. You said book, didn't you?
Did you know? I never said a word. I heard him say it.
You had the opportunity to be deadpan. You could have ridden through that one. You see, you've blown it now because you've given it away. It's called Revealing the Green Man, and it's available on Amazon. And when I was researching that, I got totally into what you just asked me. Conscious Earth, what's going on? Is the Earth in itself a huge, gigantic living entity with its own soul? And I came out at the end of it with the conclusion, the answer is yes, it is. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
But the question really doesn't answer whether or not these things that we're seeing are very much like us. Are we like ants, running round on the back of an elephant? Maybe the little green men or elves or aliens or whatever, maybe they're in the same boat. They're just in a different dimension, but they're still stuck on this ball. The ball itself, I think, operates independently of everything else. I think there are probably species, there are races, there are beings that can use that ball better than we do.
Yeah,
I think that's fair to say. And I think they probably are using it better than we do. Even trees live on planet Earth, and they exist better than we do. They just have this massive long lifespan that we're not aware of. So, again, that's something I'd like to see develop in the 21st century, more awareness of the identity of planet Earth and what it is and what it does. Don't know if that answers the question, but yeah.
Kind of. Yeah. Yes.
In the right ballpark.
Yeah.
So,
Tino.
Do you think acoustic Earth energies could be producing crop circles, like what is that? Cymatic patterns on sand. Oh yeah, we've all seen that, haven't we?
Yeah, that is a really, really good question. There's a yes and no answer to that. Yes, obviously, cymatic patterns can be produced by sound, because I work in the music business, so I'm aware of cymatic patterns. Are they what we're seeing in crop circles? I'm inclined to say no. I don't think that's what we're seeing. The evidence seems to point to some other frequency, not necessarily sound. Everything that seems to happen seems to be silent. These circles just come out of nowhere, and they are totally silent. So I think you're looking at something that's out of our frequency. So it's not sound. Electrical, maybe radiation, maybe it could even be light. Light has been seen to be involved in the production of these things. Heat, maybe heat, but everything I've just reeled off are just all different variations of frequencies. That's what they are. I just don't think it's the sound frequency. I don't think that's involved. I mean, I've got an admission to say I've not been in a circle when it's first been formed, because I live up north. We don't tend to get a huge number of them in Cheshire and Lancashire and North Wales. They don't seem to happen here. So people have phoned me up and gone, "Oh, you're not going to believe this. This is an absolutely fantastic one. It's just outside Avebury." I'm like, "Oh, okay. I've got to take time off." Trucking all the way down there, and by the time you get there, most of these things have been flattened, by tourists. And once the word gets out, you've got about 24 to 48 hours, and then they've wrecked. Absolutely wrecked. So I've been in one that's been wrecked. I've been in several that have been wrecked, which is a real shame, because I would love to have been, the first man on site. That would just be amazing. I've spoken to a lot of people who have been, and they've shared loads of experiences, tons of experiences. So when these things are what they call hot, when they first arrive, when you first get them, they're just fabulous. Virgin circles, that's what you want. But I've been in them sort of retrospectively, and the answer is you do feel stuff. Your hair does stand on end and prickle, and if you're the slightest bit switched on, you will be aware that there's been some kind of atmospheric change, magnetic, electrical change. Something's happened. I sort of tend to put that in the field of dowsing. It goes into a lot of the issues that dowsers look at. That's what you end up with. And a lot of the farmers say this as well. A lot of farmers are dowsers, because I work with them as an archaeologist. They know what's on their land, even if they can't see it, if it's not immediately obvious. And they will say, they come back the following year or even a couple of years later, they can still tell where the circle was. They can still feel it. They're still aware of it. And in some cases, there's still some kind of alteration in the environment, the crop, the grass, the whatever,
Just before we get to Steve's, Andy Ross asked a question previously, and I think you were referring to what I talked about earlier to you, Mark, the combine harvester.
Yes.
With the dog that sat in the footwell, and every time the head of the combine hit the crop circle, the dog sat up howling, so the dog could feel some energy, couldn't it?
Yeah. Cats and dogs, fabulous. Well, you saw mine wandering through. They don't have pick up on energy. They are.
Tell me, at times are they reluctant to go into them then, or are they quite happy to walk into it?
I've heard of a lot of reactions from people that have decided to go for a walk with the dog and go and have a look at the circle. So they wander into the area with the dog. I've not heard of any negative reactions.
Oh, okay.
I've heard of them lying down. I've heard of them freezing. I've heard of the hair on them sort of, ruffling. You've got howling, you're making noises, things like that. But they don't go the other way in terror. They don't try and run away. You don't have to drag them in, into the circles. I'd be interested to hear if anyone's had any bad experiences. But in what 40 years of sort of wading through this as an issue, no, I've not really heard of it affecting it. Because the famous one, isn't it? Birds don't fly over certain sites. Like, things like Auschwitz and Belsen and places like that. You go there, the birds don't fly over. And I've actually excavated a burial mound that birds wouldn't fly over. So you've got this whopping great big round circle and the birds are literally, not going over it. But you don't get that problem with crop circles. They'll fly over, they'll land, they'll feed. It's somehow it seems to be in harmony with the nature around it, the natural environment.
Okay. Oh, yeah, done it again. Give me that. Sorry.
It's all right.
Was it on purpose?
Bruton. Steve Collins asking, Mark, did you ever investigate the account of the off-duty policeman who observed the humanoids inspecting a crop circle a few years back? I've not heard of that one.
I was going to say, for me to be specific on that, I would have to have a location, because I have heard of on-duty and off-duty policemen who have come across humanoids. Funnily enough, that does happen up north quite a bit. You'll be aware it's happened in Yorkshire, it's happened in Lancashire, it's happened all over the place. It's happened just down the road from here in Warrington. We had a police car encounter a silver figure in the middle of the road. But the idea of the humanoids inspecting a crop circle, that's the bit I'm not au fait with. Were they inspecting it, or had they just made it? Or what? I don't know. I think we'd need more detail. We need a little bit more detail.
Yeah, it's a tricky one, that. Are there any celestial type connections, Mark, any solstices or anything like that to these things?
I don't think time of year affects them. Apart from the fact, obviously, you've got to have a crop.
You've got to have a harvest or a well-formed crop, haven't you?
But it does happen in snow. It can happen in snow. It can happen in frost, and it can happen in ice. But generally speaking, the time of year is only crucial to how the circle's formed. But there have been circles that contain information that appear to relate to the stars. So there is a celestial connection on some of them. They do form patterns that look like star patterns or star maps, or even have stars in them, like the photo ones, for example, with the star field in the back,
Yeah.
Oh, that's a nice question. Andrew Collins was the leading light on crop circles. The powers that be told him to shut up or else. Oh, now I've met Andrew quite a few times over the years. He doesn't strike me as the kind of person who would shut up if he was told to. That's my first response. I'd like to know who it was that told him as well. I mean, I've been on crop circles, like I said, 30, 40 years, and I've worked with a lot of investigators. The Crop Circle Research Group that was set up in the 1990s never received any problems. There was no hassle. It's probably the safest field of UFO research that I know of. The little green men and men in black and people like that, they don't tend to be too bothered about crop circles for some reason. They don't seem to be a part of that.
Do you think that's because... Sorry, Paul, go on.
Robert's just put up, and I think probably Lorraine would have got to it, but he said CIA. So I'm assuming that's what he's meaning when whoever told him.
Well, again, that's a difficult one. CIA are Central Intelligence Agency of America. So
I could be wrong with referencing, but I can just see it there. And I thought I'd pull that in.
There's a possibility that somewhere at some point in America they may have taken him on one side and had a quiet word with him. That's a possibility. But then flipping that coin on its back, he's one of the number one contributors to Ancient Aliens. So his scope and his reach and his publishing, as if anything, it's increased. You know, it's got bigger. It's got a wider reach than he had. Ooh, excuse me.
Andy's asking about the plasma vortex theory.
Well, there's several vortex theories. Everything from, you know, our crop circles formed by tornadoes and wind forces, all the way to plasma, which is the glowing ball, obviously, that flies around. There's been some really good footage of lightning, you know, ball lightning, plasma, and then there's been some really good fakes as well. Needless to say, hand in hand, you know. Well, I'm going to answer a question with a question, because, you know, for that to work, you'd have to say, is plasma intelligent? Because plasma on its own isn't going to form a crop circle. You know, that isn't going to do anything. We know that plasma exists. It's a fact. You know, it's up there in the atmosphere and it's down here on the ground when it wants to be. But I don't think plasma is intelligent enough to create crop circles. That would be my takeaway from that. So is plasma intelligent? You'd have to find that out to know whether that was the case. And I'm not a fan of, you know, hurricanes and things causing crop circles. I don't think that's a thing.
Steve Collins saying Mark, Silbury Hill in Wiltshire.
Yeah, I've been on Silbury Hill.
Is that in answer to a question that he asked earlier?
I do not know. We're losing the thread a little bit here, aren't we?
Yeah. Can I just ask you about Eastfield?
Oh, right. Yeah, he's saying, Mark, 3 long humanoids
seem to be gliding
in the copper.
The copper said. Still need a location. Yeah, we'd still need more information.
What about Eastfield? There were a crop circle that were quite prominent years ago. Can you remember that one? And it's sort of appeared overnight, and they've got cameras set up on the field. Can you remember that?
That might actually be one of the ones where they filmed the ball creating it.
Yeah.
That might be the one actually that I was referring to. 1992, maybe.
That's probably going to. Yeah, I always wonder whether it was genuine or not. What's your views on that then?
Well, that was the one. This is you've gone back to the Ancient Aliens, me appearing on there, because they gave me a piece of footage to comment on. It's quite funny because you sat there in front of the camera and the director's over in America and he's communicating with the crew, and they put this thing up of these 9 lights floating across a field, and they said, "Would you like to comment on these lights?" And I just went, "No." What do you mean, no? I said, well, I can tell you exactly what they are. They're Chinese lanterns. Someone had filmed these Chinese lanterns floating across. And I said to the producer exactly what I just said to you. I said, early 1990s, Google it, go and have a look. You'll find the footage of this ball. These guys are out there with cameras. It's going to twilight. They're trying to film UFOs. And then somebody spots that there's something happening in the field. So they swing the camera. Fortunately, it's on a tripod. They swing the camera around to look at the field just in time to catch this ball whizzing around, and you can see the crop drop below it. And that's the footage that I wanted to comment on, and that's what ended up in the program. But, oh, for goodness sake, you know, Chinese lanterns, just nonsense.
And I'm probably going to be wrong with name, but will Win Keach anything to do with that?
Keach. Very possibly.
No, we're only dealing with names here, but I think you were. But
you might be correct there, but that for me, that would be a Google. Just Google the footage, because the footage is out there, and I'm pretty sure it's credited, or they wouldn't have been able to use it in Ancient Aliens.
Right.
They've had to clear that.
Yeah, I think Steve was referring to the 3 ETs in the field.
Right, now it's just beginning to ring a bell, seeing that it was Silbury Hill. I think it was a local report in the local press about this turning up, but I've not got any specifics. I think pretty much what it is what was in the question. That's it. A couple of policemen saw a couple of guys who shouldn't have been there. They looked like they were hovering away in a field, you know, with a circle. And when they went back the following day, the circle was still there. But I think that's one of the formation stories that's associated with the circles that you end up finding in the calendars and the books down at Avebury. You know, they print them and sell them. The research groups down there. I think that's where that story originates.
Lee Roscoe, back on the UFO crashes. Have you ever spoke to anybody that's been ex-Black Ops team?
Oh gosh, would they come out and assassinate me if I gave anything away? It's a terrible question to ask that, because you're going onto ground that's secret. I haven't talked to anybody that's been on a crash recovery team. No, I haven't, not specifically. But I did know a guy who will definitely remain nameless, who was an expert in computer programming. And as soon as he left college, he went straight into the military as a programmer. And he was sat there one day, bored witless, on a military terminal. And he's only, squaddy or whatever. And he's like, oh, what should I do in my lunch hour? Oh, let's have a look and see if there's any UFOs in aircraft hangars anywhere in Britain. So he logs on to a military terminal. He'd already tried to get to the Vatican and they'd locked him out after 30 seconds. But the military terminal, of course, is connected to everything else. And he was honest enough when he came back from his initial training to say, I found one. There's one in a hangar down south. They've got one of these flying saucer things, but he shall remain nameless. The terminal will remain nameless. The rest of it is, secret. So they have got one. They've got a flying disc stored in a military hangar.
What year? Could you even, as a guess at a year that were then?
I'm going to say late 19. What would it be? No, mid 1990s.
Okay.
So you're in the 1990s,
okay.
Probably 92, 93, maybe that kind of period. So they had one. Now, that's from somebody who had no reason to tell me that story other than the fact that he was in shock and wanted to share it with somebody. I have mentioned that story before in interviews, so it's not a secret. But that's the closest I've come to anyone with high-level military clearance who's actually, come out with it directly, specifically UFO related. That's that one.
David Hunt's asking, on this new interstellar object heading towards Earth, comet or craft?
Oh, I'm going to be really boring. I'm going to say I think it's a comet. I know there's loads of talk about it being a craft, but it's not. My mates in the space industry, what they're recording and what they're seeing, it's behaving like a comet. We've got lots of comets and asteroids and the Leonid meteorite shower and another shower, and there's goodness knows what else heading for us at the moment. It's a really busy time, for things like that. But I'm going to say I think it's a comet, and with a bit of luck, it's going to miss us.
But of course, if I was a clandestine UFO, I would absolutely disguise myself as a comet.
That's what somebody will be saying, Chris.
Yeah, that's what someone's saying. I can hear him right now.
Go back to what I said about time travelers. I don't think we get visited by things from outer space. I don't think they come in through the atmosphere. Yeah. I think we are, sealed and entropy. I think we're a sealed environment. I think they're already here, and that's what we're working with. That's what we're dealing with. So it's a comet.
Oh, okay. So let's stay on that, Mark, because that's interesting. So a sealed environment. So what does that mean about the? Are you saying that relates to us as well, to NASA and actually leaving? And do you think they're using different tech to get out and not the rocket fuel?
Well, as it's not the subject of tonight's program, because I can fill a program, I've done it before. The short answer is no. We've never left. It's one gigantic cover story. Mm-hmm. And there's enough evidence out there. I mean, we are talking the 21st century now. You can get hold of all the moon footage, the Mars footage, everything. You can get hold of all of it, and you can absolutely tear strips off it. You know what I mean? You can tear into it. And I've been in film and television. I've been in production. I know what people can do. I know what could be done. Honestly, every single aspect of it is wrong. It just can't be done. From Leonardo da Vinci right through till today, everybody's known that it's a sealed environment, and we're in it. Doesn't mean we can't deal with frequency and dimension. That's a different issue, because you don't have the physical limitations.
Yeah.
But as we're dealing with things now, sticking a whopping great big engine on a piece of metal and firing it at the Van Allen belt isn't going to get you anywhere. You know, you're not going outside of the lower sweet zone. You're not going any further than that, where the satellites are.
Well, I don't want to dwell on it, but I just want to. How do you then answer the NASA fanboys and the reflections from the moon?
Well, aside from the fact we don't actually know what the moon is, because it's floating around with only one side facing us permanently stuck to planet Earth.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not a planet, it's a planetoid. We're a bit stuck as to how that works and how it functions. And, you know, I haven't got a clue. Nobody really understands that. Yeah. If you can't believe the rest of it, if nothing in the rest of it adds up, somebody producing a photograph like, the India satellite or the India lander or whatever photographed 2 of the Apollo, vehicles on the surface of the moon. Yeah, right. Well, you've seen the graphics for the India lander. You know what the India lander looks like?
Yeah.
It's like something off the back of a Weetabix box, you know what I mean? So, why should we believe these photographs that have got these little dots on that are supposedly moon landers? I have no argument with people firing a laser beam at the moon. The moon is quite clearly there. It's obviously there. Lasers operate the way lasers do. Of course, we can measure the distance and things like that. Doesn't mean there's anything on the moon to bounce it off. That's a different argument. But you can still bounce a laser beam off the moon, because light travels in straight lines. It'll go straight up, hit whatever's reflective, and come straight back. That I don't have a problem with. Some of the basic science is okay. Some of the slightly more adventurous science, sending a rust bucket with tons of stuff in that doesn't fit, when they couldn't even phone down the road, that doesn't make any sense. With no computers, etc. Nah, doesn't wash. They never went. They never went.
Paul, what's your mate called, the telescope guy?
John L. Watson.
Are you familiar with John L. Watson, Mark?
The name doesn't ring a bell.
What you said earlier about seeing his work and not knowing him.
I've probably, because I know a lot of people who shall remain nameless, because a lot of them are in positions that they wouldn't want people to know that they're talking to me. But that aside, the idea of using telescopes and what you see and images and all that. I mean, the local telescope here is flipping Jodrell Bank. Jodrell Bank is the #1 bar none sort of, that started it all. And I've followed Jodrell Bank since my dad followed it in the 50s, and I followed it in the 60s when I came onto planet Earth. It's literally down the road. So the whole idea of looking for stuff and reaching out beyond, that isn't an issue. And what we're finding isn't an issue. But some of the, quote, computer enhanced images that reprocess data that we see, that's an issue. In the old days, it was just called CGI,
Yeah. No, the reason I brought it up was because John has been filming some amazing craft out there, basically.
Absolutely incredible, and he's accredited, all over the world, really, with telescopes that he's built and the tech. But see if I can put you in touch with him. Mark.
Okay, but my question would be just, where are those craft? Whereabouts are they in what he's seeing? Are they in the upper atmosphere? Are they in the Van Allen belts? Are they, or are they in outer space? Now, outer space is a different issue. Outer space is not what we thought it was. It isn't an empty, void with no atmosphere. That's not what it's like. It's absolutely loaded with stuff. It's like, firing shotgun pellets into a microwave while turning the heat up. That's space, and it's full of gas. It's full of radiation. It's full of all sorts of stuff. So for little chaps to go whizzing back and in saucers up there, that's going to be difficult. Yeah. And again, you look at the stuff coming back from the space station and what have you. I don't have a problem with that, because the space station is still stuck to planet Earth. It's still inside the gravitational pull. It's up in the sweet zone. So to have things whizzing around up there, that's not a problem. That's still inside the ball, so to speak. It's only when you break out into what is truly outer space, not inner space. They've started calling space space that isn't space, if you know what I mean. The atmosphere isn't space. Once you get out of that, you go into outer space. That is a different ball game altogether, you know.
Okay.
Very, very hostile place to be.
Yeah. Well, you got us in an interesting area here, Mark, because we can go in a few directions from here. Anything where do you want to go, Paul, from here?
Well, can I just put a qualification in? There is just the possibility that the same beings that have got these silver flying saucer things or whatever, or another advanced civilization, has mastered the idea of traveling in a bubble. Now, that is a different issue. The idea that they can bubble the craft.
Yeah.
So they take a piece.
Some kind of vacuum. They're just,
yeah.
So they could travel subsurface as well, below oceans.
Well, yeah, that's where it's going. Okay, so you've got to remember, science itself is fluid. That's what the definition of science is. It moves on, it changes, it develops, and that's what's happening in this particular field. So I can be dogmatic about hard objects and about things that we chuck up there, but I'm not ruling out the possibility that there are other civilizations, other beings, other creatures that could actually survive in that hostile environment. But they would have to have a hell of an appreciation of where they were, you know.
So what about
miles beyond us?
So what about your thoughts on other beings, other intelligences living inside the Earth?
It's
it's supposed to be hot, isn't it? Is it all magma?
Well, like you say, science, it keeps changing, doesn't it? Because you've got the Earth's crust. Now they're telling us there's this enormous ocean. There's all this water down there, you know, that's I don't know, 50 times the amount that we've got on the surface.
Yeah.
And then they come out with these things like, oh, fossil fuels, you know, and then the next minute, oh, well, there's oil, but it's nothing to do with the fossils. It's the lubricant for the Earth's crust, so it's there anyway, you know, so it's indefinite. So you've got, you know, crust, oil, there's water down there. They also analysed the core, because we used to think it was, like you say, magma, iron, etc. That's called Olson's paradox. They tried to solve it because iron doesn't work. If you have a magnetic iron Earth core, the Earth doesn't function. So the computer modelled it, and what they actually came up with was it's actually quartz silica. It's liquid crystal. More specifically, chances are it's amethyst. So we're actually sat on a giant crystal ball. That's what we're sat on. The whole of the Earth's core is that. As soon as they did that, as soon as they modelled it onto an amethyst ball, Olson's paradox disappeared. Everything worked. You had your gravity, your electricity, your atmosphere. Everything just works if it's made of crystal. So, like I say, science is ongoing. So the idea that things can dive in there and, you know, go in through solids. Well, when you start looking at frequencies, you suddenly realise that there's no such thing as solid. Nothing's solid. Everything is fluid.
So if within the Earth, because I mean you've just answered this for me anyway. If within the Earth it's not molten magma, that explains. Does it explain why in the deepest parts of the ocean there's some of the coldest parts? You know, it's absolutely cold. You'd expect to be in deepest parts of the ocean to be warm.
But actually, the deepest part of our ocean, chances are it's butting up against the other ocean that we've only just discovered is there.
Yeah,
you know, it's a back to what I was saying about revealing the green man and the Earth, the way the Earth's made as an entity. We don't really understand it, you know. If you go with the as above, so below, you know, the oil is the blood, the water is the fluid, the same as we've got in our structure. We function electrically, we function on light, we function in so many different ways. So does the planet. You know, there's a core, it's a crystal core. We'd be lost if we didn't have silica in our bodies. You know, we'd just crumble away. We're basically a carbon-based life form living in a silicon world. That's what we are. So the whole structure needs a re-evaluation. We need to re-understand what's going on. Then a lot of the mysteries, I mean, what we're talking about now, your crop circles, your dimensions, your beings, etc., space, a lot of that will make sense. You know, it'll fall into place.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah, I think Alicia's just asking in relation to the previous stuff we were talking about. I see them every night. They're in our atmosphere. She's saying, what do you call craft, Mark?
I'm old. I call them unidentified flying objects. Forget your UAPs and all the rest of it, you know, and lights and drones and balls and whatever you want to call them. You know, if it quacks like a duck and it looks like a duck, shoot, it's a duck. It's just, for me, it's an unidentified flying object. I'm not so much interested in what I see. I'm more interested in what it's doing, because, you know, from an observer's point of view, that's the golden question. You know, is it just flying across the sky in a straight line and it's blinking, in which case it might be a satellite, doesn't matter what color it is, or is it zigzagging across the sky and then belting off at 100 million miles an hour? That's clearly not one of ours, you know. So it's not so much about what you call it or what you see. It's about what it does. You know, it's about what it actually does. Yeah.
Oh, thanks very much, Lee. Very much appreciated.
You're right. I always say that. Sorry, Chris. I always say that. You know, one man's satellite is another man's UFO. You know, because it's all interpretation, isn't it? And some people, and I don't mean Lisa, by the way, but some people just misidentify and think that they're looking at something from alien related, shall we say, to simplify it, and it's really just a satellite.
Well, I think all three of us are evidence based. You know, whatever we look at, we try and weigh up the evidence. Yeah. And the more evidence you've got, the more that's available, the better that weighing up the evidence is. And the general public generally don't have the information that we have. You know, I mean, the three of us, you know, looking at a light bobbing around on a camera would come up with very different conclusions, I'm sure, than the man in the street.
I just want to touch on your knowledge of sort of like not Templars and secret societies and that kind of stuff, just because it's kind of relevant here, just not for a number of reasons. But let's take the crop circles. Let's say there's an unwritten rule about they passing us knowledge directly, breaking some Star Trek rule about interference. Okay. Then you've got there's a lot of different Templars now. I know you know about all that stuff, but there seems to be these fraternities and these secret occult groups. Okay, it seems to me that you have to kind of earn this knowledge, and this is the reason why there's not been that much progression in, I would say, the public's awareness, if you like, of everything. I mean science. I mean the deeper things, the deeper matters in life. So it kind of, there's a bit of you said it earlier, paradox there in terms of there's a secret element to it, but yet there's a willingness to open the door for some people. What is that all about? That's what it seems to me, anyway.
Ooh, that's a tough one to answer. You've got to bear in mind that there are many different kinds of human beings, you know, Homo sapiens or whatever, humans. We come in a whole range of different colours, which is the nicest way of me saying that runs right across everything. So in terms of what we're capable of understanding and how we feel and how we learn, our knowledge, you know, everyone's at a different level. You know, I have no doubt whatsoever Stephen Hawking could ram me into the ground in 30 seconds, you know, that people know stuff and people do progress, you know, and it's not limited solely to secret societies. I started off and all I wanted to be when I left art college was a drummer. That wasn't to be, you know. I had so many experiences, met so many people, and it just, next minute, I'm falling down the rabbit hole, which is a great metaphor because I only live about 2 miles away from where Lewis Carroll was born, you know, so I am going down the rabbit hole. I do it every day. So that sort of then forces you to progress. So I think there is an element of people who are in, and it's not a bad thing, but people who are in societies, because it applies to other things as well, you know, witchcraft, druids, Freemasons, you know, it's right across the board. I think they look at a person and they try to decide, they try to assess how that person is going to react and how that person is going to develop. Now, some people are out there are going, oh, well, you can't do that. You know, just that's not right. That's not right, that. I actually think it's not just for the benefit of the secret society, it's for the benefit of the person as well. Because I think there are things that are known out there that would make most people's heads explode. You know, and it changes your very existence. Now, I know everybody talks about this conspiracy theories and going down the rabbit hole and tinfoil hat and nothing. That I hate it because I get memes all the time. Nothing is ever as it appears to be. And I just sit there and I just think, you honestly don't know how true that is.
Yeah.
You know, soon as you start dropping down that rabbit hole, it becomes very difficult to do your shopping in Tesco. You know, it's kind of, that's the level we're at here. Most people don't deserve to go down that rabbit hole because it's really bad for them. It's actually a really bad idea. You know, and then there are other people who somehow sprout wings and fly. They just fly with it, you know. And I think that's the real reason. I think it's been like that for thousands of years. It does not matter who the secret society is, the intelligentsia, the controlling powers, blah, 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 etc. I have no doubt the three of us could run this country better than anyone in Parliament. So it's not about that. It's not about what you're a member of or what you're trying to do or your money or your power. Because I go even further. I say it's the universe itself. It's the planet itself. It's those powers that be in our lives, in our paths, that bring us on, that give us this information, that challenge us, that develop us. No amount of interference by any other human being is necessarily going to bring that about. Either it's in you to do that or it's not. And that's, I mean, over years, you know, over the whole time I've been on planet Earth, that's kind of where I've come down to land. I've landed at that. I mean, I've met people who are Templars who are fantastic. I've met people who are Templars who are complete idiots. So, you know, it's not specific to any particular thing, you know. It's almost like human beings have got an inbuilt tendency to try to find a home. So if, you know, a path or a religion or an occupation or a society or whatever, if that appeals to you, then as long as you understand it's a club, you know, you're only joining a club, but if it feels like home and you're comfortable with that, that really is the best you could hope for. That is the best thing, you know, to do. Yeah. Go that way.
Because what you're looking into, Mark and Chris and a lot of people, you know, in the chat and they'll watch this afterwards, it fits. What we're talking about fits, but it'll not fit everyday Joe, will it? You know, whose mind's made up and he's not going to change it.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, I was sorry, Matt. I wasn't saying it I wasn't saying it was a good or a bad thing, and there are a lot of obviously conspiracy theories out there about it. I just wondered. I think you can make sense of it. And also, look, if you've got a bunch of brilliant minds, it kind of makes sense they're probably leading us in a better direction than, you know.
Oh, you've got to be careful because human beings have different special abilities. So the way it should work is that the majority of brilliant minds get together and lead us en masse. The way that it tends to work, though, is you'll end up with, you know, your Bill Gates and your Elon Musks and your, you know, they're great, but some of them are, you know, mad as a sack of frogs.
Yeah.
You know, you've got to be really careful. You need more of a corporate, you know, overall, you know, more of humanity needs to get together basically to sort things out. You need variety. Our ability to survive is based on variety, not limiting. You know, you could never have, like Hitler wanted to do, you know, you can't have 12 people in a castle who are a secret society that control the world, because that ain't going to work. It's impossible. You can't do it. You know, it just can't be done. They'd end up killing each other.
Is there no questions? Because I just want to touch on something we haven't touched on, and it might throw you this one a little bit. So just cut it dead if it does. What are your views on the Green Man?
Wow, I've written a book on it.
Yeah, that's why I'm asking you. But I didn't know whether you'd want to go down that road. We've only 20 minutes left.
Yeah, I don't mind
as well.
Yeah, no, it's a good question.
It relates, funnily enough, because we have drifted into this idea of, Gaia, you know, planet Earth having its own consciousness and being its own thing and having its own soul. Well, as you go through history, what the various races of people have done in the past, they tend to personify things. You know, they'll have a god of thunder and a god of the oceans and, you know, a god of the sky. And, well, the god of Gaia, the god of planet Earth, the god of Earth energy and all that is the Green Man. But there is a couple of provisos to that, okay? The first proviso is it's always a man. That's it. So I know we've got green ladies. I know we've had green women. I know since, you know, the 60s and 70s, you know, blah, blah, etc. Modern, but no. And there's a good reason for that as well, because in the past, the green man was generally a human sacrifice. So I tend to think ladies are a bit more sensible than to volunteer as human sacrifices, you know. I don't think that happened in the past at all, but men did. Men were human sacrifices. I mean, to cut a long story short, the thing that got me interested in it was I live just up the road from Wilmslow, which is in Cheshire. It's not far from Alderley Edge. That's where they got Lindo Man. They got that bog body out of the bog there. Oh. And they decided they were going to analyse the body to see if it had any tattoos. It was down at the British Museum. Obviously, the Iceman had just turned up and he's got tattoos. So they decided they're going to do the same thing with Pete Marsh, with Otzi the Iceman. So, with the bog body. Yeah. So anyway, they decide to analyse his skin. So they're looking for tattoos. This is in 1993. The report was published in 1994. They didn't find any tattoos, but what they did find was that his entire skin was soaked in an almost lethal dose of copper, straight out of the ground, ground up, metallic copper powder. Which, for me, just honestly, the lights just came on, because I'm like, okay, there he is. He's a human sacrifice. He's next to Alderley Edge, which is a copper mine. So they go and get the copper, they melt it down so it's pure copper, they grind it up. Well, the first time they paint it on him, he's gold, because that's what copper looks like when it's first metallic.
Yeah.
Within 20 minutes, that's oxidized, and it's dyed in bright green. What they then do is they cut his throat, hit him on the head with a hammer, and I think they stabbed him as well, and then they dumped him into the bog. They're sending him on the way to the other world. They're sending him into planet Earth, because their heaven was down. The Celts had the heaven down. So he's going into the other world for a purpose. This is round about 200, 250 AD. So the Romans are kicking ass at this point. So it's fairly obvious that's what they're doing. They're sending him on the way to the gods to say, you know, we need a bit of help here, mate. But then I had this idea of him sinking. You could see him sinking into the water. He's bright green, and there's all these leaves, you know, floating around him. And the light came on. They have it. That's the first archaeological evidence, hard archaeological evidence of a bright green man going into the other world, which is planet Earth, you know. I mean, I've got him back further than that. Green man goes all the way back to Babylon. He's there in the form of Humbaba in the Epic of Gilgamesh back in 7,500 BC. So it runs all the way through. So if anyone can get hold of that book, it's a bestseller. It's on Amazon. I've got another plug-in. But yes, that's sort of my thoughts on the Green Man. So all these old ladies that go into garden centres go, oh, isn't he cute? Oh, lovely chubby face. I'll put him in my garden. I'll get more butterflies and frogs and birds. You know, put him on the wall. He's a human sacrifice. That's what you're doing. You're buying a severed head to stick on your wall. That's what he actually is.
I guess where I'm going with it, though, what about the people? And I've spoken to some people who seem really credible who claim to have seen this apparition.
Oh, now you're coming closer. This is Jack in the Green, or Puck, or you're into elf lore with this. Almost fairies.
Just like crop circles, we know there's some truth to it, and I don't think that everybody who's claiming to have seen this and it's morphed out of the foliage and looked at them. I don't think they're all.
No, I've seen actual photographs. People have caught that happening on photographs, but I've struggled a bit, knowing what I know about the history of the Green Man. I've struggled a bit to make that fit. Where I ended up, this is where I ended up. The Victorians, so you're only going back 200 years, the Victorians went bonkers resurrecting old things, and they brought back Jack in the Green. So like all the Robin Hood stuff, all that kind of thing, that was big business in Victorian times, really big. So they brought all of that back. Now, because human beings are creative, we are one of the few, in fact, I think we're the only species that we know of that can turn nothing into something. We think it up here.
No, you've just answered answering my next question.
Next minute, it's there. And I think that's what we're seeing. That's the mechanism that I think we're seeing.
Are we creating the Green Man?
Yes, I think what we see now in terms of the form of the Green Man, I think it's not projection, because it goes way beyond projection. Something is definitely happening in the real world, and I think we are the ones that are affecting the real world. You know, if it's pareidolia, if we're just looking at something and we think it looks like a face, well, next minute it might be a face. You know, because we've brought that into being, we've made that happen. It's something that ufologists and, you know, people that deal in that side struggle with, because again, that's another speculative origin for what people are seeing. Are they seeing what they want to see? Are they seeing what they expect to see, what they're conditioned to see? All cryptozoologists struggle with that. You know, it's a big issue, a massive issue, and you've got to factor it in. You have to factor that in. You know, there is an element of that, I think, that happens.
It's great that you're such a broad brush, and you're not sort of confined. I mean, everybody's going to take that away from listening to you tonight, Mark. And I think Chris is on that page, and I am. You know, and hopefully a lot of people in chat. That there's everything needs consideration, doesn't it?
Yeah, you need to be a generalist, because somebody once said to me years ago, a specialist is someone that knows more and more about less and less. And that's absolutely true. That's what we've been stuck with in science for about the last 50 years.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Shy Ghost is asking, what's Mark's views on aliens, demons, and cryptids being merged as the same entity, or are they separate?
Well, I've said for many years, I've really got at it, because I said, you know, Ezekiel's whirling wheels in the Old Testament, you know, flying towards him across the desert, are they flying saucers? You know, it's more about what the viewer is interpreting. It's what the viewer is seeing. It's in their frame of reference. You know, I don't have any problem at all there being some kind of overlap. You know, back in the Tudor times, if a little green man came walking down through your garden gate, that was quite clearly an elf, you know, or a demon, because that was their logic. But now if a little green man comes walking through your gate, even if it's the same one, you'll automatically assume he's an alien. You know?
Well, are we just dealing with terminology there, though, Mark?
I think so. I think so. I do believe that these things have been around for a long time. I do believe they've, and very much the same kind of thing affecting human beings through time. The problem with history and the problem with archaeology is not everything survives. So the records of people's encounters and what people have seen, very seldom do those general population records survive, you know. So they could have, I mean, they had epidemics of things happening in the past, and it's just sheer luck that we've got any record of these things happening. You know, flying saucers over Germany, and devil's hoof prints across the countryside, you know, green children coming out of a wool pit, and, you know, it's just purely by accident that those records have survived.
Thank you.
Dragonborn's asking, Mark, who created us? I mean,
I love it when people ask really easy questions, you know. Good grief. Okay, I'm going to slightly alter the question here, because really the sort of center of the issue is not who, but what. So I don't think it's a who. I think there is a personality involved, and the shortest answer I can give to that would be, if you took every human being that's ever lived through the whole of time and added them all up into one being, you might get somewhere close to whatever that creative force, that creative thing is. Because clearly we're all chips off the old block. You know, I mean, I don't think anyone would argue that we're not all divine lights. That's what we are. We are divine beings of some kind. You know, whatever you path you follow. I don't think anyone would argue that. We are a soul inhabiting a body, and we just drive this thing. We come from somewhere else and we go to somewhere else at the end. On the other hand, what made all this, the more that we push into that, the harder we dig into that, the more amazing and the more incredible that something turns out to be. You know, mathematics, time, space, physical creation, you know, the more that we're pushing into all these different issues, the bigger and the bigger and the bigger and the bigger this thing seems to get. And it doesn't matter if you're looking out to the galaxy, because there are billions of stars out there now that we're seeing for the first time. Or if you go the other way and you decide you're going down to an atomic level or a subatomic level, and you start looking at that, they're just equally as complicated. and we're running across the same structures, the same things. So whatever it is bigger than us. We're not going to be able to comprehend it. We're not going to be able to get a handle on it, but it does have consistent patterns. There are repeat patterns. So whoever it was that coined that phrase, as above, so below, absolutely nailed it. That's been in magic for so many years. I'm not even sure where it originated. Probably, with the Jews somewhere in the Middle East, back in biblical times, probably the first time that ever came up, or beyond that, probably Babylon or Assyria, or, but they nailed it. They absolutely nailed it. And that's kind of, I think that's where we're at. I don't think that is a question that we can answer who, but I think it is a question where we can start looking at what.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, there's an answer in that.
This is interesting, Paul. I mean, it's one of these subjects that we've dabbled in, the paranormal element of this. Have you done much of that, Mark?
Well, I can give a really simple answer to that, and the answer is yes. Because I'm actually sat in a haunted house. So I literally put up with it every day.
Really?
Literally. There's stuff going on every single day. We lose objects, we have teleports, we have things switched on and off, we have apparitions. 2 days ago, there was the face of a vapor cat appeared at the top of the stairs. I didn't see it, but my stepdaughter did. Because I heard her, she walked through the door, she went, "Oi, you!" at the bottom of the stairs and ran up the stairs to try and catch it. By the time she hit the top, it had gone. And that's typical because that's a hot spot. Top of the stairs is a hot spot.
Does it increase when you start talking about it or focus on it as an energy, as a family?
I'm going to say no, because we're cheating, because we're built on a Romano-Saxon graveyard. We're actually built in a cemetery. So we're sitting on top of bodies, literally. So, it's like, I don't know who put the house here or what they were up to, but they seem to know what they were doing, and they've created a portal on purpose. I mean, the building itself is a bit weird as well. There's loads of odd aspects to it. And I grew up here, so, hey, you can see what the result is. So yeah. And I also, I ended up working in the church for quite a number of years, and I worked as what's known as a ghostbuster or an exorcist. So over a period of 15 to 17 years, I did that. So I came across all kinds of stuff back in the 80s and 90s. So
there's another live stream with straight away.
There you go. Yeah, bring me in for ghosts. I've got loads of stories.
Absolutely.
We could do a whole night on that. Yeah.
Oh, there's another question there. Do you want to? They're all coming in at the back end. Mark, what do the cats make of the strange things going on?
Each animal that we've had here has reacted differently. Generally speaking, my cat, who passed away sadly last year, would turn into a ball of fur. So it was dead easy to know if anything was going on, because the cat would be staring at nothing and, typical reaction you'd expect. The other one, the black and white one that just wandered through here, that cat seems to have made peace with whatever's here. And what we do with that cat is we watch to see where it goes, because it seems to like the energy of stuff coming through, and it'll go and sit wherever the trouble spot is. No, so, for example, when the daughter ran up the stairs the other day to try and catch the vapor form at the top of the stairs, the cat was about 2 steps behind her, following her up to find out what was going on. So that he has no fear. So the animals react in different ways, and I've had different cats over a number of years that have all reacted slightly differently. But usually they are aware. They are, definitely aware that there's stuff going on.
So as soon as cat becomes intuitive, you guys focus on what it's doing.
Yeah, I mean, what I'd say to anyone with animals, anyone with pets, is get to know your pet, because it will have its own unique reaction. The classic one with the black and white is it'll sit there, it'll look at something that isn't there, and its eyes will just go huge. And there were 2 enormous black pupils in the middle of its eyes, because it's focused on something. But we know that cats can see things and hear things that we can't anyway, so that doesn't come as a surprise. Yeah. But it's another tool that you can use to see what's happening in the environment around you. Excellent. I did have a pet crow through lockdown as well. That went off to a sanctuary a couple of years ago. That used to react because that didn't like something. So if you saw it headed in the opposite direction, you knew exactly that there was something coming through going the other way. Yeah. So if it went left, you went right, because that's where the phenomenon was. It just tried to get the hell out of Dodge as fast as it could. So they all respond in different ways.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I was going to ask you just before Andy, there's a question coming up from Andy, and I was just going to go back to, just before we finish, to Danes Dyke. And you could call it a modern phenomenon, but it's not really. That the dogman's a modern phenomenon, but obviously we know the werewolf isn't. So
yeah.
Andy's asking here, it was an archaeologist that reputedly found the Dog Dyke werewolf remains in a peat bog. Have you heard of this case and thoughts to its validity?
Ooh. The last archaeological case I heard of that involved a werewolf was the very famous Hexham heads. Remember the stone heads that were found?
Yeah.
And I've spoken to witnesses of that, and I spoke to the archaeologist lady at the Manchester Museum when they were stored in the basement there. So I have no problem with the connection there between archaeology, the heads, and something happening, something coming through. This particular one, I've got no first-hand knowledge of through the archaeological community. If remains are found by an archaeologist, those remains usually end up somewhere in this country. I'm going to limit it to this country. They don't tend to disappear. Okay, there isn't an agenda as such. So I should have heard about that. And again, it depends what the remains were. You've got to be very careful, you see, because in the past they used to break bodies up. Mm-hmm. So you might have a human body with a cow's head, because it's the cow's skull with a human skeleton. So it's the interpretation of the find that's quite important in that particular instance. If I knew where those remains were, I would throw some science at it. I would try and get them carbon dated. I would check out the reports and try and find out where the remains came from. If they're in a ceremonial context, were they buried with a dog's head, rather than a human head? The Romans were a beggar for doing tricks like that. They'd take the skull off and put it somewhere else. The idea was to stop the individual from coming back from the dead. If the head's between the knees or the head's down at the feet or, wherever, they did it a lot with gladiators, to stop them coming back from the other world. So that's Romano-Celtic, wolves, dogs, I think you're in that territory. And the dykes as well. Most of the dykes date between 300 BC and 600 AD. So they're all late Celtic period remains. So I would expect that to appear somewhere about the same time as the Bogman.
Yeah.
Lindo Man.
Yeah, I was going to say, Mark, because you're kind of a historian, you're an archaeologist, you've dabbled in all areas of the paranormal, and you've also dabbled in the occult. And the werewolf dogman thing touches all those. It touches all that. So
it does.
It's obviously it's very common now, and Paul's taking loads of sightings up there and different kinds. Paul, just tell briefly, just to make this the last thing we talk about. The transformation thing, the element, the latest sighting that you had. Can you just tell Mark about that?
Well, the guy's coming up on Friday, and I'll be spending a couple of days with him. And well, I hope to do anyway. And basically, we're in Danes Dyke, or he is. When I say we, he's paid for his parking. It's daytime. It's near the ticket kiosk, which isn't a busy place. When I talk about this, it's pretty. It's quiet, and this guy works on motor vehicles, and an old Fiesta pulled up, and he was looking at it, thinking it were in good condition for the year. I think they were a Fiesta. It's 100 feet away. How do we know that? Because we took a surveyor's tape and we measured it. Only about 2 weeks ago, he came through. He says, and from nowhere, this figure in almost like a wax jacket, but looked greeny brown colour with a big brimmed hat, appeared and walked behind the car. And this elderly lady, I think she's either getting out of a car or she's at the ticket machine. Says, and he looked at it, and I think his thoughts in his head were, "Oh, he's a big bugger. You won't want to mess with him." And then when he realised it had gone behind the car, well, when it did, the car's about 4 foot tall, 4 foot high. He realised it were twice the height of the car, and it said it stooped down, and the hat changed, and he saw what looked like fur, almost like a mane, and an elongated face appear, and it disappeared into the distance. It's an incredible account. He wrote it up in detail straight away, did sketches and everything, and and I always look upon it that this guy's got nothing to gain by telling me such a story, plus the fact he's traveling a considerable distance to retell the story, just like the lads in Broxer at Wolflands with Wolflands, you know, and it's incredible. Now that I've never really heard one where is that if this is true, he's seen some kind of transformation.
Yeah.
And what is it? It's almost magic.
Well, it is. Again, we're down to labels. We're down to what we label it as. In magic, it's referred to as atavism, which is the ability of a human form to transform into an animal form. Atavism.
Word. Brilliant.
Well, that's that in magic. That's what it's referred to. If it's atavistic, it's got the ability to transmute from one thing to another, and mostly humans going into animals. That's mostly what it refers to. In magic, it depends whether you believe that literally happens or whether it sort of emotionally happens. Now, we've got evidence from Native Americans fairly recently that in some of their ceremonies, transformations are seen to take place. And even in, I'm going to really push the boat out, even in conference situations, psychics and mediums and what have you have been seen to transform. Yeah. So it's doable. It's all, you know, well within the bounds of what supernatural researchers would accept. It's very, very doable. Whether or not that was physically, literally there, or whether it was a projection or a creation of him as a viewer, that's interesting, because I would have loved it if there was a second witness.
Yeah, now, just to fill you in a little bit, he'd no belief in any of this and no knowledge of any of this. But it was with his partner, but she didn't see it. He just kind of stopped and he couldn't believe what he was looking at, and it was really interesting.
I mean, sort of breaking out again a little bit further, studies of the brain, studies of the spirituality of human beings, creative abilities, channeling, you name it, whatever. All those extra abilities, the extra brain abilities, that brings to some extent into question exactly what it is that he saw. There's no doubt that he saw it. I'm with you on this one. It sounds like he definitely experienced that. That is what he saw. How the mechanisms involved in that, it could be anything that's going on, because he's only got the body as a sensor. He's only got his senses to record what he's seeing in front of him. What is actually happening is unknown. You know, that's the mystery part of it.
I'm aware at time, but I just need to add it was 19th of October 2023. I've also got one from October 20th 2020 in the same area. We're talking literally, I don't know, 500 yards away. These people don't know each other. I'm also speaking to a guy tomorrow. We're actually going into the dike tomorrow, Ian, and he's had the same experience in the same area. Not the same experience, some kind of what a ridiculous thing to be saying, some werewolf type entity. But these men don't know each other.
It's patterns, isn't it? It's patterns. Yeah. Your research is vital, because patterns tell you so much. I mean, again, back to Skinwalker, Skinwalker Ranch. They've had so many things happen and so many things repeat, and so many, like you say, independent witnesses. Something is clearly going on.
Without a doubt.
It doesn't surprise me at all that it's happening in this country. In fact, it's been a bit of a surprise to me that it hasn't happened more.
It could well have been, Mark, but UFO researchers tend to invest the time in the UFO. We're seeing this cross-pollination now, aren't we, of all the genres, and I think that's where you've got to be to start seeing the patterns, or some of the patterns anyway.
Yeah, and you've got to accept that there's more than one answer to the same question.
Yeah, fabulous.
Just before we sign off, guys, do both of you want to shout out your books and your wares and where people can find out more about you both?
Yeah, I'll do that quickly, because I think last word needs to be from Mark. So
all right, okay.
My books can be obtained through the truthproof.uk website. You know the paperback copies of the books. You can also get Wolflands, which myself and Les Drake made, and we're really proud of. Truthproof.uk. If you're going to buy them overseas, use the eBay link, then we can go through global shipping. And if you want to buy the Kindle version of the books, they're on Amazon, but I'll be putting the paperbacks on Amazon again shortly. enough from me. Thanks.
Okay, mine's dead easy. Mine's just as simple. If you want to contact me, Facebook, you can send me messages on Messenger. If you want to find any of the material I've done in the past, the archive stuff, Lost Treasures, etc., YouTube, just go on YouTube. You'll find me. Type in the name, type in Lost Treasures. If you want any of the books, there's 9 of them. So go and do a bit of research. They're all on Amazon, every single one of them. So there you go. Couldn't be simpler.
Thank you, Mark.
Okay, fantastic. So, yeah, that brings us to the end of yet another last transmission on a Tuesday. We'll be back next week. We're not sure about a guest, Paul, next week. Are we just you and I?
No, at the moment we aren't. I've got a guest on Thursday, Tom Whitmore, talking about Majestic 12. So,
and that's on Truth Proof.
That's on Truth Proof, yeah. And Mark, will you come back? I mean, we
Yeah.
scratched the surface.
Yeah.
We'll be back on here.
Yeah,
I think both of us would be glad to come back. Yeah.
Right, fantastic.
Thank
Thanks everybody for watching tonight. Lee, Roscoe, thank you very much for the donation, and anyone else who I missed. Lorraine, thanks for moderating. And that's the end. So we shall see you guys next week.
Thank you.